Hey team, welcome to our second strength training program for Meso 2. Again, we're going to do our 40 seconds on, 20-second off work to rest ratio, and starting with just a regular Turkish get up here. So all the way down to the bottom, I'm going to roll onto my elbow, replace my elbow with my hand, replace my knee at a 90-degree angle. Replace my hand with my knee at a 90-degree angle into a half lunge and
rest,
stand up and reset. So this is our first 20-second rest block, and remember to always finish that last rep. It might cut into your rest a little bit, but it's all good. There's lots of time here in these sets. So here we go again with another rounded Turkish get up on the other side. Let's see how I do here. I wasn't driving my hips very well in that first set, so good. A little bit better hip drive. And nice and strong. I've got my arms straight up. My knuckles are pointed to the sky and not putting a lot of strain through my wrists. Good. Not too bad. So reverse lunge, fall to the side, use a little turn of the knee, and lay yourself down and come back up. If you're not comfortable with the Turkish get up, you can always replace it with a swing or with something else. So I actually didn't press record for the first part of my warm-up there with the Turkish get up, so tucked it in there. And now we're getting into our first work set on the board. So we're going to skate here for 40 seconds. And I'll try to do a little technical comment for each set. So first thing I'll say is when you're using the slide board is always keeping your toes pointed forward. Try not to open up your toes as you're pushing off or as you're sliding across the board, and really focus on pushing off your whole foot or even your heel when you're pushing off the block, and you're going to get a lot more power off each push.
rest,
And here we go, another rest of 20 seconds. And our next exercise will be a lunge or a warrior row. So taking a warrior stance with my lower body, lunging forward. My legs are slightly wider than hip width, with my rear foot externally rotated slightly to provide myself with a little bit more base of support. And so I'm taking the weight from my toe and rolling it back towards my belt line or into my hip. And you can see here that I'm adding a little bit of rotation from a neutral grip, from a prone grip to a neutral grip at my side. And I'm doing it fairly quickly, maybe 1.5 to 2 seconds in the eccentric and concentric, but really just keep it controlled. And I believe I'm going to switch views for you so you can see from the front. I'm going to take that warrior position with lunge, making sure that I keep my hips in check. So everything's lined up on that side, and pulling the weight from the front of my foot to my pocket, essentially. Really try to stretch when you're in the front position, and as you're pulling through, feel a good contraction between your shoulder blades, and going back a little bit further down into your lats as you pull that weight towards your hip. Finishing up here.
rest,
And we'll jump back on the board once again. Brush off the sand from your feet so you don't scratch your board. Nice little stretch here. thoracic opener. And here we go.
Work.
So I use a couple arm pumps to find the cadence that I want to have and settle in. I'm holding my wrist, not just my fingers in the back. And what that does is gives yourself a little bit more stability, and it tucks your elbows in nice and tight to the body to create a little bit more aerodynamic position if you were to be skating. Not necessarily something that you need to be aware of when you're doing slide board, but when you're skating, staying as aerodynamic as possible and potentially lower than I'm skating here would be a great thing to do. So we've got a bit more rest, and we're going to go into a shoulder press, or a standing shoulder press. What I'm going to do is a bottoms up shoulder press, and I find that this is really helpful for particularly my left shoulder. I've got some issues with stability in there and more than likely need some surgery to tighten things up, but I find that the bottoms up kettlebell press is really helpful for stabilizing my shoulders and using a lot of the small muscles in and around the arm, shoulders, forearm, and even helps to train grip strength. Just be careful if you do this one. Sometimes it can get a little slippery, even if you're working out outside on a hot, humid day. Just make sure you've got that under control. And I'll switch views here during our rest, but if you're more comfortable with doing a kettlebell press, or if you've only got a dumbbell, you can do an Arnold press or a strict press. That's totally fine as well. There we go. So I'll do a little hammer swing to bring it up into position. So you can see that my arm's not right straight out to the side. It's at a 45-degree angle to the front of my body. And I'm adding a little bit of a rotation in here. But really focusing on pressing the weight straight overhead. And a good thing that I try to do is to hide my ear with my bicep. That way I know that I'm actually pressing straight overhead and not out front of my body. Working the shoulders and not the upper chest. Okay, and here we go again for another round of skating. So this board has a little bit of an incline by the blocks. I actually am becoming quite fond of that. I find that it helps me generate a little bit more pressure and power in each push, and helps with the fall. And what I mean by fall here is that I'm not only trying to push off the block, but I'm allowing myself to lean towards the direction that I'm pushing. So not only using my muscle, but also using a bit of gravity to generate speed, so I'm falling away from my push, or falling away from my foot. And combined with keeping your toes pointed straight forward and focusing on getting the push to come from your whole foot, not just off your toes, you're going to find you're going to be able to generate a lot more speed and be more efficient. Next up is a squat curl. So I'm going to take a comfortable squat position. I'm going to use a cannonball grip on the kettlebell, so placing my forefingers through the handle with my thumb on the outside of the handle. I imagine you can do it on the inside too, whatever's comfortable for you. And I'm placing my elbow just on the inside, sort of underneath the teardrop of my quad, right in between the muscles, somewhere that's comfortable but keeps that elbow in place. And I'm using my shin as a guide, so I'm trying to lower my forearm in line with my shin, and doing that on the concentric portion as well. Not trying to tuck my arm in for that extra curl, really trying to stay nice and strict and focusing on the contraction on the top part of the movement. Here we go again. Other side.
Work.
So I'm trying to keep my hips relatively square. Just leaning slightly on my non-working leg. Again, using that cannonball grip. Keeping everything in line. Aligning my forearm with my shin. And controlling that movement. The tempo is just controlled. I'm not worried at this point with really long eccentric or concentric movements or a pause. Just focus on controlled through the whole movement. Get into another round of skating. Very nice. Okay, so here I am starting out just to get a little bit momentum with a 2-arm swing. Once I've settled in, I'm going to hold on to my wrist and relax my back. I think we'll talk about recovery leg position here. So you can see as I recover my leg, I make a small circle bringing that leg around through the back. And what I'm trying to do is have a moment to relax my quad, let some more blood flow through, and I drive or collect my recovery leg right under my body, driving it through and forward right beside my working leg. And as that recovery leg is driving through, I am also trying to compress down on the block or onto the slide board and create a little bit more pressure.
Work.
Next up is overhead tricep extensions. So for this grip, I've got my thumbs in the handle, and I have my 4 fingers clasping the bell on the outside. Trying to keep my elbows pretty vertical, so keep them pointed toward the sky, lowering the weight down below right at the nape of the neck, I guess, and pressing nice and vertical. A little bit of movement in my upper body. I probably could be a little bit more strict there. But I think it's okay. Good. Okay. Next up, another round of skating. See what other technical comments I can come up with. So here we go. So using the arms for a little bit of momentum, making sure that I'm keeping my toes straight, pushing off the whole foot on the block, or even a little extra emphasis through the heel. And as I'm coming across, I'm circling that recovery leg around and collecting myself over top of my working leg. So I'm trying to find a nice nose, knees, toes alignment over top of that pushing leg, sinking down, trying to generate a little extra pressure and push as the recovery leg comes through. So my mantra when I'm skating is usually pressure, push, pull the recovery leg through under the body, keeping the abs engaged and tight, or actively tight, not overly contracted.
Work.
Next up is push-ups. Nice and slow and controlled. Still working on getting my fitness back. So I'm going to keep these nice and controlled so I can make it through to the end of the 40 seconds. My elbows are at about a 45-degree angle from my sides, and my thumbs are pointed slightly forwards. And I like to press myself a little further forward with my push-up. I find I get a little bit more activation in my chest. Okay, I made it. Good. So the next up, we're not going to skate. We're going to work on the quads a little bit more. And we're going to do some sliding low walks. So
work,
very similar to a slide back lunge, but I'm going to allow my upper body to fold over into a skating position or a speed skating position. I'm going to slide my leg back while I push the other one forward, and I'm going to drop down into two 90-degree angles. So my forward leg is making a 90-degree angle, and my back leg is making a 90-degree angle. Just keeping my upper body nice and relaxed, focusing on
rest,
my center of gravity being in between my legs or in the arch of my foot for each push. And next up, we're going to do some gar hammers, sliding gar hammers. So stretch yourself out on the board in a nice high plank. Bring your knees in to about 90 degrees. You don't need to really tuck yourself under. So, and then extending yourself out into a high plank position. So now I think it's now called, I guess, the bottom of the gar hammer would be
rest,
called a quadrupedal plank, if I'm not mistaken. So our quadrupedal hover, and then sliding your legs back into a high plank position. And next up, we have some hamstring slides.
work,
And I'm a little hidden by the clock here, but what I'm focusing on is keeping my hips nice and high. Everything is locked in, and I was initially looks like I was starting out with my hands on my chest, but I've since lowered my hands to help with some stability. Keeping my toes pointed forwards, keeping everything in line, not allowing my knees to collapse in on the movement at the bottom or at the top. Everything's in line with the hips.
rest.
Good. And that's it. Congratulations. Thanks again.